the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Hello, and welcome to another new episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. This summer, I'm hosting a bunch of quick hit solo episodes on topics that I get asked about all the time. Today, we are talking about what used to be my own personal favorite form of suffering. That's right. Today, we are talking about being overwhelmed. So if you are overwhelmed, do not worry. You are in exactly the right place. Listen to this to hear some of my favorite secrets, tips, and tricks for getting out of overwhelm and back to alignment. So I am not exaggerating when I tell you that overwhelmed used to be my absolute favorite form of suffering. Life right now is a lot. I just think about how much was stripped out of my day to day of January 2019 as compared to now. I used to commute. I used to have about a million travel plans at any one moment. I used to go on business trips. I used to have multiple social plans after work on a weeknight. I used to have multiple family commitments in a given month or year. I used to have lots of plans in general. and I think right now a lot of us are all of a sudden trying to figure out how to integrate it all back in. Like we took a lot of that stuff out. But we also filled the space, right? I mean, yes, we filled some of that space with downtime. I know I definitely did, which has been so needed and will continue to be so needed. But I also feel like work expanded to fill that time. Like home time expanded to fill that time. Sleep expanded to fill that time. I'm sleeping more than I've like ever slept in my adult life. There's only so many hours the day. We all have the same number of hours in our day objectively. And we're going from like spending the last 2.5 years having like all these things stripped away, many of which like make and made us very happy. And we're trying to like jam it back in as we continue to live in a pandemic, not to mention all the other totally awful stuff that is happening in the world right now. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, you are so not alone. I feel like I have a lot of conversations with a lot of really badass women on the regular about the feeling of overwhelm that is sneaking in as more of these things that used to be a pretty regular part of our pre-pandemic lives make their way back. And one of the things I love to remind myself of when I get overwhelmed is the quote you may have heard before, like, if you're overwhelmed, be grateful that you're not underwhelmed. And while I think that reminder can be helpful, it's definitely not enough to like fully it doesn't address the problem. It just makes you feel better maybe in the moment that like overwhelmed is maybe preferable to being underwhelmed. So the number one thing as I think about how to navigate the feeling of overwhelm that I think often contributes to the feeling is being reactive with our time. I think a lot of times it's so human, and this is so something that's true for me too. There's a lot of inbound. There's like inbound requests and demands on our time, our energy. People are asking us to do things, which is great. I love a good party invite. I love an invitation to do all sorts of things. And if I don't take the time to think about how I want to spend my time, then I don't really have any sort of like a framework for determining if something is a yes or a no for me. And so I think for a lot of us, a lot of people right now who are feeling overwhelmed, it's a result of there all of a sudden being way more inbound than there has been in a very long time, and not having taken the time yet to necessarily figure out what time is open to other people, what time is available to other people, what time is available for certain things. And so I would really encourage you to figure out like what time is available for certain things. And there's like a number of different ways that you can do this. I think about a former colleague I had who was like, I have one night a week to do fun social things. And that's it. That's my limit. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, that's like so specific and strict, and also means you have to make plans with people so far in advance. But like she had configured her life in a way that that's what was open to people. Um, and that's what kept her sane. So I'm not necessarily advocating that you like implement that rule specifically. I feel like I was kind of like the opposite in that I realized at some point in my early 30s that I needed to hold at least one night a week of having no plans. And so I was allowed to fill up all the rest of the time with plans, but I needed one plan free night. You can figure out what works for you, but I also really encourage you to figure out like what feels important to you. One of my favorite ways to figure out like what is going on when I'm feeling overwhelmed is the wheel of life. So if you know me, you've probably done this before. It's one of my favorite things to do with like all sorts of people. I've honestly done it with hundreds of people now, virtually and in person, mostly virtually. And the reason I love it so much is because, like, as someone who loves being overwhelmed, just kidding, I hate it, but someone who does it a lot, I know that usually when I'm feeling overwhelmed and it feels like it's everything that's wrong, it's actually one or two areas of my life that are not going well. And that if I were to address those one or two areas of my life, it would have like spillover effects in all the other areas that are not necessarily feeling good. And I also want to like call out and name that, like, yeah, usually when we're feeling overwhelmed, it is those one to two things. In addition to those one to two things, it's often also the patriarchy, systemic racism, our very broken democracy if you're living in the United States. So, like, there's also systemic things that are wrong that are not necessarily you. And the purpose of this exercise is like figuring out like what things are within our immediate control so that we can go about addressing some of these bigger picture challenges that maybe feel like they're a little less directly in control, but we can't pour from an empty cup. And so, what are the things you need to do to fill your cup back up? So basically, the way you do this, if you have a pen and a piece of paper, grab them. If you are driving or doing something else, please do not grab them. You can take this as a thought exercise for now and maybe grab some paper later. But basically, look at, you want to like draw a circle and split it up into like different pieces that are like pie slices. You don't have to do it this way. You can also totally do like a matrix or like a grid, but the idea is that you're going to look at all the different dimensions of your life. So, in no particular order, you're going to look at like your relationship right now to your family and community, your relationship right now to love and desire, to your living situation, to money, to your career, to curiosity, growth, and fun, to radiance and health, to your spirituality. Um, I think I have one more that I'm missing, but we'll start with those for right now. So you split your circle into all the slices of the pie. And then you basically look at each of these areas. And if you had to give each area a score from 0 to 10, 0 being like, I hate everything about this and I would love to change all of it. 10 being like, everything in this area is literally exceeding my wildest dreams, could not be better. And 5 is like a meh. Go ahead and give each of those areas of your life a score from 0 to 10. And you can hit pause if you need a minute to do this. I'm definitely talking faster than I think is possible to do the exercise. But once you look across the different areas, once you give yourself scores, then I want you to look at the like one or two lowest scores. And I want you to think about how you would feel if those areas were a 10 and how that would impact everything else. The goal here is really to figure out, like, is there an area that's like really most meaningfully contributing to how you're feeling? That if you were to just focus on this one thing, it would actually shift almost everything else. And then once you figured out that bucket, like which bucket is the one that you want to focus on, I want you to look at the highest score. What's like the closest to 10? Maybe there's a couple. And I want you to consider what it is that you're doing in that area of your life that is making it so great. How did you get to an 8, a 9, a 10? Maybe it's not that number. It doesn't matter. Everyone's wheel is different, and there's no rules in this. But how did you make that one so full? And is there any lesson from the area of your life that is feeling really full that you can extrapolate to help you improve the area of your life that is feeling less full? This question is really like the what, because for almost all of us, there's things that we're already doing somewhere in our life. There's reasons why the things that feel like they're thriving feel like they're thriving. And to fix the thing that feels broken, you probably need to do something that you're already doing, something that you already know how to do. I think often we feel like it's like something impossible, and like it's actually just taking something you're already doing and applying it to something else. So I invite you to think about, like, what's the one thing that you can do in this like relatively low scoring area that is going to make a shift. Because often when we are feeling overwhelmed, to bring us back, it is not actually everything. It feels like everything, it's not actually everything. And so figuring out what it is that actually needs to shift, I've found, can really help me figure out like where I need to focus my energy to get out of this form of suffering. So can't wait to hear what you think about this episode. Again, many of you know I'm obsessed with the Wheel of Life. I do offer workshops on it from time to time. So be sure to check out my website to see if there's anything coming up. But in the meantime, hopefully this helps bring a little bit of sanity to the overwhelm that you are currently experiencing. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the Women Changing the World podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is liz.best, that's lis.best, or you can find me on LinkedIn by searching my name, Liz Best. Join my mail list by visiting elizabethbest.com/monthly meditation, and you'll receive all the latest updates on events, retreats, and opportunities to work with me, plus a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch, and I'll see you in the next episode.